Next on Newsmax Prime, authorities in Boston shoot and kill a terror suspect who confronts a cop and an FBI agent with a knife. General Michael Hayden joins us to talk about it. Then, is Hillary Clinton on a downward slide? The polls say so. We'll see what Newt Gingrich has to say. Plus, Craig Shirley on the fate of Reagan's 11th commandment in this crowded Republican field, and Morgan Thompson with a look at the prime numbers for Dr. Ben Carson. It's all ahead as Newsmax Prime starts now. Good evening and welcome to Newsmax Prime. I'm J.D. Hayworth. Late this afternoon, the Senate approved the USA Freedom Act, allowing for data collection, but with major restrictions. Today's Senate vote follows two reports with national security implications. First, Osama Rahim, who was part of what police are calling an ad hoc terror network, confronted a Boston cop and an FBI agent wielding a knife this morning, so authorities shot and killed him. More on that in a moment. Also, the AP reports the FBI is operating its own small air force with low-flying planes conducting surveillance over major U.S. cities. All of this masked by utilizing fictitious companies. Miranda Khan is in our newsroom with more. Miranda?
JD, the Associated Press report says the FBI plane surveillance equipment is generally used without a judge's approval, while the FBI says the flights are only used to assist with ongoing investigations. That AP report shows that within a recent 30-day period, the FBI flew missions over 30 cities and 11 states across the country. This type of aerial surveillance opens a new frontier for law enforcement, providing what the government maintains is an important tool in fighting crime and providing terrorism and intelligence surveillance. But the program does raise questions about whether there should be updated policies protecting civil liberties, as many of the new technologies employed pose intrusive opportunities for government spying. Now, as far as company names used by the FBI, the agency says it uses fake businesses to protect the safety of the pilots and the aircraft. FBI spokesperson Christopher Allen responded to questions by saying, quote, specific aircraft and their capabilities are protected for operational security purposes. He went on to say these FBI planes are not equipped, designed, or used for bulk collection activities or mass surveillance. But with the NSA's bulk data collection under the microscope right now, the details of this program are certain to be reviewed closely. JD?
Thanks, Miranda. Let's go further in depth now with retired Air Force General Michael Hayden. The general is the former director of the NSA as well as the CIA. General, when we take a look at this aerial surveillance program, I understand the FBI asked Congress for $5 million plus for the program back in 2009. Is scrutiny being given to this program now because of the renewed focus on the Patriot Act?
Oh, I think that's almost a 1.0 certainty, JD. I mean, we've got a kind of ambient background atmosphere in the United States right now where a lot of folks are focused on privacy. And frankly, JD, that's fine. I mean, look, what's the old DJ's line? We all went to different high schools together. We all are part of the American political culture that has a healthy distrust of government. And so we need to keep a close watch on those folks, even those folks who want to keep us safe, like me. And so it's not surprising at all that this has become an issue. Now, what I fondly hope, though, is that when we have this discussion, we don't have a bunch of fear-mongering or hyperbole, and that we actually base this discussion on concrete facts, the way a mature democracy should actually look at these questions, trying to balance liberty and security.
General, fair enough. We understand that. And let us turn to the other major story prior to this afternoon's vote in the Senate, and that was what happened this morning in Boston. Television station WCVB reports that the man who was killed wielding a knife had been under surveillance for more than under 24 hours surveillance. After they received intelligence, the man had been planning to attack law enforcement officers. It appears this must have been some sort of breakthrough for our intelligence people here domestically. Your take on it?
Sure, JD. Two or three things. Number one, this is another example of the new normal, the self-radicalized individual, somewhat like we saw in Garland, Texas. So I'm afraid we're just going to have to get used to this a bit. The second is that although this particular threat was under 24-hour surveillance, we don't have the resources to keep all possible threats under such surveillance. So we're entering into a bit of a difficult period, I think, JD, a period of at least slightly increased danger. And then finally, JD, and I think this might be most important, and the thoughts just occurred to me recently. What ISIS has done has created a narrative that there is unrelenting hostility between Islam and the West, between Islam and Christianity. And what we're now seeing are some folks, isolated, depressed, otherwise lacking meaning in their lives, grabbing onto that narrative and using that ISIS narrative of unrelenting hostility between Islam and the West to explain their own situation and perhaps to motivate their own actions. That's where I think we now are, and that's why we're entering into a period in which we're going to see, unfortunately, more of these kinds of events.
Mike, against that backdrop, let's talk about the Senate this afternoon voting to approve the USA Freedom Act so that spy agencies can resume data collections, but with some major restrictions. And now that goes on to the White House for the president's signature. We talked about this before this all unfolded, some would say unraveled on Capitol Hill. Are you comfortable with what the Senate decided to do, joining along with the House on the USA Freedom Act?
Well, JD, it would not have been my preferred outcome. I do think we're taking a bit of a risk here. We're kind of stepping into the unknown. And so what I hope is that we keep a careful watch on how good Plan B is. I mean, Plan B is that the telephone companies keep the metadata, NSA gets to query it. It remains to be seen if the phone companies will keep the data, how long they will keep it, and how easy or difficult it will be for NSA to query it under these new circumstances. What I would expect, JD, is intelligence professionals, once they've got this thing up and running, intelligence professionals to give the Congress and the public a candid view. Is this as good as the old system? And if it is not, do we then want to give up that piece of threat warning for what? A greater comfort level with regard to who holds the metadata?
Mike, we have about 2 minutes left, and I'd be remiss if I did not bring up Iran. Despite the administration's claim that the Iranian nuclear program had been, quote, frozen, the Iranian stockpile of nuclear fuel increased about 20% over the last 18 months as those high-stakes talks continued. General, I'll just ask you squarely, is this a situation where our Secretary of State has been played by the Iranians?
You know, JD, I think we've got a dynamic underway here, and I don't think it's a healthy dynamic. I can see it playing out on two levels. On one level, and that's the political level, I see an administration that really wants to put some points on the board before the clock runs out on the administration. In other words, we may want a deal more than the Iranians want a deal. And secondly, JD, at a tactical level, and I've seen this happen, and it happens all the time. When you get involved in these kinds of talks, the talks take on their own momentum. And your folks at the talks seem to want to get to resolution even when perhaps they shouldn't want to get to resolution. And I fear that's what we have going on here. JD, I fear, and I hope I'm wrong, but I fear we've gone from that old mantra where we used to say, no deal is better than a bad deal, to a circumstance now where any deal is better than no deal.
And on that somber note, we'll have to leave it. General Michael Hayden, we thank you very much for your time tonight from Newsmax Washington. Now, we'd like to hear from you. You heard what the General had to say. You can send me your comments via email, newsmaxprime@newsmaxtv.com. There's also Facebook and Twitter and newsmax.com/comments. We're coming right back.